Hello and welcome back to I'll Watch What They're Watching, where we're curious and adamant about cinema. I'm Kiri and I'm one of your hosts.
And I am Adam.
And today we're doing one of our AvC charts, and I got to pick the pairing, and I've been wanting to do one of them for quite some time. So we'll dive into first 2005's Pride and Prejudice, but then we are going to really dive deep into Portrait of a Lady on Fire.
Indeed. A happy Valentine's Day to everybody. I think movies do a really good job oftentimes capturing romance and capturing love stories. These are two great examples. It was kind of one of the thoughts I had while watching this. So Portrait of a Lady on Fire came out in 2019, right?
Like, it snuck in the very, very end in December. It didn't really hit the States until the following year.
Okay, that makes sense. One of my initial thoughts, beyond what the other initial thought I was about to share, but I don't trust France's Oscar delegation or whoever they're working with to send their nominee, because they had Emilia Perez last year, and they had some adaptation of Les Mis the year that Portrait of a Lady on Fire was there. And it's not that, the Academy Awards are getting more international, I think, and getting better at some of that. Ironically, 2019 was when Parasite won, or the 2020 Oscars. It's
Right.
obviously some of that is there and kind of changing in that thing. By not nominating Portrait of a Lady on Fire, they effectively shut it out of any other category. And so as I was watching this, I was like, whoa, I feel like I'm watching something that the Academy generally loves. What happened here? But anyways, I'll let you I'll let you chat about that before I finish my other thought.
Yeah. Fun fact about that, which I literally just found out yesterday, I also thought it was an adaptation of Les Mis. It is not. It has the same title, but it's not actually like the traditional Les Mis that we know.
No kidding.
That being said, it is pretty widely accepted in like the letterbox and film communities. Like, France, you screwed up.
Yeah.
Portrait of a Lady on Fire was clearly like, and I don't want to get too far into Portrait of a Lady on Fire, but like one quick thing I've mentioned before, British Film Institute, their magazine Sight and Sound, do every 10 years they reach out to critics, and they have a bunch of critics send in their top 5, what they think are the best 5 films, and then they do a ranking. The full thing is 250, but they kind of hone in on the top 100. Portrait of a Lady on Fire, this most recent one, I believe was number 32.
Yeah.
And on Letterboxd, it's also something crazy like that. It's in the top. Like, this movie, I've had critics who have been like, in 25, 30 years, we're still going to be talking about Portrait of a Lady on Fire.
Yeah, no, I agree. We'll talk more about it. So finishing my thought was, I get really annoyed when people talk about movies nowadays not being as good as they used to be. Now, I'm one to jump in that and say yes. I mean, I just had to watch Jurassic World for my Oscar race versus what came out, the first time with Jurassic Park. Even Jurassic Park 2 and 3, which aren't good, are still steps ahead of what Jurassic World is. So, I think there's criticisms and there's things there, and there's issues we've talked about. Being digital sometimes means that there's less attention on specific shots, or there's less intention on how you're going to do something because they're going to do it in post or whatever it is. But my thought watching these, Pride and Prejudice came out in 2005, which, is 20 years ago, and Portrait of a Lady on Fire came out within the last 10. But my thought is there are still a lot of good movies, in particular romantic movies, that have come out in the last couple of years. And so I think that, Past Lives is the one that comes up immediately as like one of the gut-wrenching, heart-wrenching movies that really resonated with me. But anyway, I just think that there's a lot of schlock, a lot of, stuff to filter through. But every year it feels like there's a new one that's like, this is really, a lot of people didn't like Materialists, which was Past Lives, same director. So I'll just say Past Lives.
Right.
But anyways,
Well, and especially if you expand, and we've talked about this as well, especially if you expand outside of the US or even expand out of live action films, like I consider Your Name to be a
exactly.
beautiful romance. So yeah, I would agree. I think in our day and age there is just more content in general, and so it feels difficult to sift through the stuff to find the really good stuff.
That's fair. And you know, what is more accessible to people and probably what they're watching maybe is of lower quality. So then that general sentiment rings
Right.
out, which I guess that does make a lot of sense. But you know,
Which is why I am pro physical media.
like I said, and we'll get a lot more into it in the Oscars episodes, but I really think the Oscars are a good thing because someone like me wants to watch everything that's nominated because I love the ceremony and I love the celebration of movies that it is. And so I'm
Mhm.
watching, I was way surprised at how many I hadn't watched. I'm probably watching 35 to 40 movies that I wouldn't have otherwise watched. And
Mhm.
that opens up a lot of things. I find some gems. I find, you know, my taste refines of like, okay, if these are things that are considered high art and like of generally good quality, why is that? And what are the things that I'm taking from it that I like? And why are some things that I aren't nominated that I do like? What's happening there? Are they snubs or do I just, you know, need some of that popcorn filler sometimes? And that's true sometimes, but
Uh-huh.
anyways, getting way off track, but just kind of in my thoughts, I guess, a little bit
Yeah.
about movies
No, good
recently,
points.
and I think that that's all in there. So, anyways, I didn't see anything in the theaters this week. I almost did go see Avatar last night because I have to eventually for the
Yes.
Oscars. I might go on Discount
Yes, yes.
Tuesday this week. We'll see what happens. You didn't get to any more this week, did you?
No,
It's
no,
only
I
been
had
like
a big
4 days since we recorded, so.
right, right. I had a big paper on I mean, I saw Arco, but we talked about that last week, and then I had a big paper due yesterday, due on Friday. So I've just been and work has been crazy. I had a work meeting and just life. I mean, I
Right.
feel like every week I say this, but with I am not like a massive Super Bowl person, so I'm kind of hoping to sneak to the theater while it's quiet because everyone's going to be watching the Super Bowl. So,
Wow. Well, that's why we're recording early so that I
I
can
figured
make my preparations.
I'll probably be watching some of it. We haven't been keeping up with it much, but Sarah is quite a football fan and she is a Patriots fan. So we were talking about it and she was like, she goes, "Who's in the Super Bowl again this year?" Because again, she really likes getting into it, but we haven't because
And you're like,
we
the
only just
Patriots.
sporadically yeah, and I was like, "Yeah, I actually looked it up earlier today." I was like, "I think it's the Seahawks and the Patriots," and I went, "Isn't the Patriots your team?" And she goes, "Yeah." So I said, "Are we because I asked if she wanted to watch the Super Bowl, and she was like, "Oh, I don't know," and then we figured out what Tuesday are, and I said, "Are we watching the Super Bowl now?" And she goes, "Yeah, we'll be watching the Super Bowl."
That's awesome. Yeah, I was telling a couple people there is a pattern. You know, we moved to Kansas for grad school, and what do you know? The Kansas City Chiefs all of a sudden very good, winning Super Bowls, and we're
Right.
just, you know, enjoying that, and people around us are enjoying that. We moved to Washington. Guess who's in the Super Bowl? Seattle
Right.
Seahawks. So I don't know. There's a pattern, a correlation, causation. Who's to say which one? But
Oh,
certainly
jeez.
something interesting. So that's been a lot of fun at work too, just kind of being
I'm sure.
involved. I was in a hype video or whatever for Washington City's. I don't know. It's on Facebook. You can find it. So I took someone's jersey and pretending to be a Seahawks fan, but
Nice.
whatever. Yeah.
One last thing I'll just say on this because I just think it's kind of interesting. I grew up in Arizona where the Cardinals are not like widely beloved. And then went to school and spent some time in Utah, and Utah doesn't have an NFL
Right.
team. So moving to Denver was a little bit of a culture shock because I was just like, there is Broncos merch everywhere.
Yeah. No,
People love the Broncos.
I've had a similar experience. You know, mostly grew up in Utah, and even before that was New Mexico. So both of them, it's just kind of like a smorgasbord. One of my friends' family was a big Packers fan. You'd see lots of
Yeah.
Cowboys fans. You see some Broncos fans because it's, you know, closest to Utah. So that was always funny. And then I, you know, went to Ohio and I was like, oh, I could be a Cleveland Browns fan. And that was a big mistake. Had to walk that one back a little bit just because of it. It's a long story, but they made some terrible decisions. They paid a lot of money for a quarterback who did a lot of bad things. And I said, I don't
Gotcha.
have to be a fan of this team. And so I just didn't. So
Dial it back. Dial it back.
yeah. So
Yeah.
it's been good. Anyways, many say that football is romantic, but let's talk about some real
There we
romance, shall we?
go. Absolutely. Pride and Prejudice. Before we like kind of dive into the nitty gritty, I do kind of want to know like what's your history / experience with this story? Like, have you read the book? Have you seen other versions? Was this the first time? And just to cover our bases, we're talking about the 2005 Pride and Prejudice, directed by Joe Wright with Keira Knightley.
Right. My experience is I grew up with a sister. I have two sisters, but one was left the house when I was 3. So mostly just one sister, couple is 6 years older than me. So to say this hasn't been on when I've been around would not be the truth, but to say that I've sat down and really watched this, no. There would be some
Interesting.
things that I would sit down and watch with her, which I'm very grateful for. There was one TV show, Drop Dead Diva, which we would watch every
Mhm.
Sunday night together, which, total, it's a hard thing as a teenage boy to admit that sometimes in a group of friends type thing. So this is just one of those things that it's like growing up would be on at various points in time, but I'd never sat down to watch it.
Right.
And I'm sure both versions too, the BBC miniseries with Colin Firth. I'm sure that's been on. Allie watched Pride and Prejudice this round with me and said that many in her family prefer the miniseries. So I'll watch it. Yeah, I had a good time watching this movie, so I have no issues turning that on sometimes. Yeah, so my experience is probably what you would expect from a typical teenage boy that has, well, even younger than a teenager, actually. I wonder if I was a teenager, maybe I would have been more interested in, but, my sister being like 6 years older than me, I probably would have been more like 9, 10, 11, 12 when she would have
Right.
been into this. And so just not interested at all in that type of thing. What about you?
Yeah, no, that makes sense. Yeah, I grew up with the miniseries, with the BBC miniseries, like regularly, and it's like there's a joke in my family where we'd get like all 6 cassettes from the
Sure.
library, and we would be like, okay, just 2 tonight, and then we'll do 2 tomorrow because it's 6 hours long, and before you know it, it's 1 a.m. and we're like, well, we might as well just put the last one in. So
That's awesome.
it's kind of a thing in our family where we know we can't just watch a couple episodes. Like, if we're gonna watch this thing, we're gonna sit down and freaking watch this thing. But I have a lot of love for the BBC version. I think a lot of it is really lovely. Colin Firth, Jennifer L are both so good. I watched this one for the first time a couple years ago, and it was one of
Okay.
those things where I'd watched the BBC version, was doing a refresh, and I was like, I'm gonna give this one another shot because I remember watching it when I was quite young because, again, we loved the BBC one so much, but I remember not liking it, and my family as a whole came down pretty hard on it because, we were like, "Oh, there's so much missing," because it's, 2 hours instead of 6, and we were like, "Oh, there's so much missing, and this character isn't right, and this character isn't right, and they're not doing any of this right." So just the point of comparison, and, like, my family still kinda has that opinion. When I rewatched it, I was like, "Hey, guys, this is 2005 version. It's actually it's pretty good." And had some family members being like, "What are you talking about? I don't think so at all. It's ridiculous." One of my brothers actually came to my rescue. He was like, "Yeah, I actually watched it recently." And like, "Is it the BBC version?" No, but like, there's some good stuff here. Like, if you want a shorter version, because the BBC one is lovely. It's gonna take a Sunday afternoon. This one it is a little shorter. It's a little more palatable in an evening, and I think it's a good time. I quite enjoy the 2005 version.
Yeah, and I don't know why I had thought this, but my perception of this, probably just internal bias and just the world we live in and being a boy or a man and just not giving things the credit it's due, or just sort of perceptions of the patriarchy is basically what I'm saying here. But I kind of just assumed it was not that good. It was just something that, girls loved because romance and that type of things. And again, I think that's just some internal bias or just some internal ways of approaching. You've been talking a lot about documentary you watched about women in film and sort of
Yeah.
a lot of the things and just the perception. And so I don't say I'm totally above all of those internal biases or things like that, and it's something I need to work on. But as I was watching this, I was just like, wow, this is really good. Like, the cinematography, I'm like, this is like really, really good. And so I looked up, and turns out there's lots of, Reddit threads or different things about people saying that this is a major snub of the 2006 Oscars not being a cinematography nomination. And one person commented like, well, which one are you going to kick out? And listed the 5, and they're all very highly regarded. And I saw Brokeback Mountain, and I was like, oh yeah, no, I'm not kicking Brokeback Mountain out. But anyways, it was probably 6th or 7th that year and getting nominated for cinematography. But I was extremely, extremely impressed in all the technical abilities, along with, the all-star cast of people that you're like, oh yeah, this is a lot of people that are very good.
The cast is crazy because you had, you've got Keira Knightley and then Matthew McFadden. But the other sisters are people that now I'm like, oh, they've done some stuff. Whereas at the time they were, this was very early on in their career. So you have like Rosamund Pike, who has gone on to do many, many things.
It's hard for me to watch. Yeah, it's hard for me to watch her without just being like, Gone Girl, Gone Girl, Gone Girl. Like, that's all I can think about watching.
But to me, I think that's what's crazy is I saw her and I was like, oh, Gone Girl. But she plays Jane, who is like this adorable, sweet. Anyway. But you got Carey Mulligan, she was in Promising Young Woman a handful of years ago. She's definitely made something of herself. Jenna Malone has been in a ton of stuff. She was in Love Lies Bleeding a couple years back, is the big thing I know her from. But yeah, it's crazy that at the time, I mean, yeah, you've got your Donald Sutherland and you've got your Judi Dench and your Keira Knightley, but a lot of these people, this was very early on in their careers, and like, what a cast.
Right. Yeah, no doubt. It's a great cast that keeps you engaged.
And then it's written, obviously, Jane Austen did the novel that it's based off of, but it looks like someone named Deborah Moggick actually did the screenplay as well.
One of the funniest things I saw about this was, I can't remember if it was about the book or about the movie, but someone shared like funny reviews about something you love, and it was this, and it was like, all this is people going to each other's house.
I mean, you're not wrong.
I'm like, yeah,
you're not wrong.
It's funny, and that's one of the things I was thinking about, of like, why does this work? Because my thought during Portrait of a Lady on Fire, which we'll get into, is I think what works so well for me is this is a really intriguing plot that keeps you engaged, and I'm like, so why do we like Pride and Prejudice? It's I don't know. There's really not a ton going on.
Yeah, I think I think because it's based off of a novel, there's a lot more, like, we're not seeing a lot of action on screen, but there's a lot going on, like, mentally and emotionally. So, like, that's the thing, is you see everyone loves a good enemies to lovers trope. You see these two characters on screen together, and you want them to kiss. Right. And the whole movie is just them leading up to them kissing. Like, that's what romance is. And so yeah, I think it's also kind of the idea behind like Little Women, in my opinion.
Okay.
People think there's almost like an old wives' tale, and I think I mentioned this a little bit on the last episode, that like people and men don't want to hear women's stories. And we see that in Little Women. She sends a little piece of Little Women to the publishing guy, and he's like, yeah, this isn't, no. And then sometime later, his little girls get their hands on this manuscript, and they run over to him. And they're like, where's the rest of this? What happens to the Little Women? We got, like, what's going on? And he's just like, what? You want this? And so that's kind of the thing, is like, they mentioned it in that documentary I watched, is that like movies with female leads actually do quite well in the box office. And so Yeah, I think that's just what it comes down to is we get to see a glimpse into these lives and this time in England, and it's you've got yeah, these beautiful landscapes and these beautiful people doing beautiful things like dancing and writing and
Yeah.
walking around these beautiful landscapes. And so yeah, I just think that that's where it comes down to is we like to see just these little stories, and we like to see beautiful people doing beautiful things.
Well put. That's really well put. I can't think of a shot. I mean, I can think of lots of different shots, but I think just watching this movie, the climactic scene of, you know, Mr. Darcy showing up at dawn, that
Mhm.
alone, in the fog and the deep V, um, and
It's so good.
the way they kiss and the camera goes to the sunrise and it's just such an incredible thing. You have to watch The Studio on Apple TV with Seth Rogen, but there's a whole episode and he's this studio head that, wants to be everyone's friend and wants to be involved and everyone's just annoyed with him and he shows up to this film set and it's like it's a oneer and it's this they have to film it perfectly to get this golden hour scene right, with the
Right,
sunset. And it's like, so they're doing this and you can only do it during this period of time during the day, right? When the sun is going to be exactly where you need it to be. And so, of course, he keeps
right.
messing everything up. But it just reminded me of that, of like, wow, like this was masterful. Like this is a work of art to be able to frame all of this so beautifully. Like, it's one of those things I think that to have a successful movie, even a period piece, is to tap into emotions that I think people have felt in their lives. And I
Mhm.
feel like obviously not that exact thing happening, but the feelings of like a new day and a long night and just like a release
Mm.
of a lot of the frustrations or tensions over the period of time, all coming to that one moment. I was pretty astounded by that. I talked
Yeah.
earlier about things that I look for and kind of refining my taste and things that I like. I like that. I like very
Yeah.
intentional cinematography that is supposed to elicit emotion. Extremely well done. Can't think of many examples that do it better than this.
And it's gonna be really interesting. I'm honestly excited that you watched this so recently for the first time because I think it's gonna be interesting to compare against Wuthering Heights,
Right,
which comes out the day this podcast comes out,
right.
which is very kind of some similar themes. But
I was tempted to
yeah,
read
no,
that, but didn't quite get to it.
it's a little dense in my opinion. But yeah, no, I think the cinematography and the framing I think is really solid throughout. The scene it's at about the halfway point where I don't know, the fight scene is how I kinda connotated my brain when he's basically like, "Hey, I love you," and she's like, "Yeah, you can go screw yourself."
Right.
It's just yeah, I find it very funny. That is also just framed in a it's very close quarters. It's lots of close-ups and it feels very almost like trapped and claustrophobic and just it heightens that tension, which I think is really cool. The acting across the board is also just I again, it's different from the BBC version, but I think there's not a single person in this that I'm like, "Yeah, this acting is bad." I don't love Mr. Bingley, and I think Judi Dench is kinda phoning it in, but there's a lot of people that are really bringing their A game here.
Yeah, I don't know that I agree with the Judi Dench one, but
She's
no
great
doubt
no matter
everyone's
what she does.
right.
Like, that's what I'm saying is I don't think she's trying terribly hard, but I also think that her not trying hard is still better than most of Hollywood.
Okay, I can get that. I do feel often watching this movie, I'm the Leonardo DiCaprio Once Upon a Time in Hollywood meme where he's pointing at the TV. Um,
Yes.
I'm like, oh my gosh, I've heard that reference in the wild, or I've done this type of thing. And when Allie is kind of funny, Allie's very funny. When she knew I was watching this. I had started it and she was finishing putting Oliver to bed and she came down to watch it with me. But she said she just stood up and she walked by me and she just flexed her hand and then said, "That is all," and sat down on the couch. And I was like, okay.
Yeah.
So obviously the hand flex is a huge deal in this movie. And I think that
Yes.
that is a trope that I'll eat up every time. There's one in Portrait of a Lady on Fire too.
Yes.
But that
Well,
little thing.
that's a big thing in lesbian culture is having, like, do you have lesbian hands?
Sure. There's one in Challengers too. I can't wait for you to watch Challengers. That one in
Oh, yes.
particular is like the way that they use it. So I highly recommend that one. I'm surprised we haven't got to that one yet in this podcast because that's one of my favorites from the last few years. Yeah, I really, really happy with Pride and Prejudice. Glad I knocked that one off as far as what it is and my experience with it over time. And I can confidently
I'm
say
really
it's very
glad
well
because
done.
you were very. I didn't see if you had a letterbox review, but you were kind of vague in, like, you didn't tell me if you liked it or not, and so I just was kind of like, well, we'll see what Adam thinks of this thing. So I was curious coming in if I was going to be, kind of, if we were going to be discussing, oh, here's what we loved, or if it was just going to be me defending Pride and Prejudice for 20 minutes.
Yeah, I try to do that sometimes with knowing we're having a podcast episode. So I did intentionally do that. But Portrait of a Lady I did rate. I didn't review, but I figured I didn't want to leave you in suspense on that
Yeah.
one.
But where do you land with your star rating on Pride and Prejudice?
I don't know for sure. Probably like a 4.
I sit at 4 stars with this one.
Yeah. And again, I really, really enjoyed it. So happy to have watched it.
Perfect. Well, now that the big one, Portrait of a Lady on Fire. And again, I have been wanting to rewatch this for some time. I have been wanting to show Sarah this for some time. I have been wanting you to watch it for some time. So I am so, so excited that we got around to this. Portrait of a Lady on Fire, as I mentioned, came out December of 2019. The director is Celine Sciamma. She was also the writer. And then starring, and I'm probably going to butcher these, and I'm so sorry, but I do not speak French, but starring Noémie Merlant and Adèle Haenel. And then the maid is also, Sophie is played by Luana Bajrami, which again, I don't know if any of those were pronounced correctly, and I apologize. I do know I got Celine Sciamma right. But she also previously had done Petite Maman. Both of those films, Petite Maman and Portrait of a Lady on Fire, are in the Criterion Collection. And I believe she is working on something now. There was very little information of it on IMDb, except it appears to be animated.
No kidding.
So we'll see. But yeah, I have talked about this before on the podcast. This is a movie I love and adore, so I will get into it soon. But I want to know just what your experience sitting down and watching this was like.
Yeah, it's always tough to walk into a movie with really high expectations. A lot that goes on with that. That being said, I feel like it did meet my expectations to being very good. Everything that you would want, a complex sort of story that doesn't have, a clear-cut, every character should do this and be good. It's sort of ambiguous as to what decisions are going to be made, and that's exciting. But then also it does a good job of not sugarcoating anything and being very real to real life experiences, to where you end it and you're like, I feel really sad.
Yes.
Yeah, spoilers ahead. But it's you said notes and I peeked at them, and I think what I'm left with after watching this movie being, I remember you in our first episode, or technically second episode, talking about the reverse Bechtel test and how this essentially has there's some men in the beginning, and then there's one dude that shows up for dinner at one point, and there's men in the art gallery at the end. But to not focus on men and to not have men involved in this story, you're going to get way more into this, so I'm not going to steal your thunder. But I think I understand what you say when I feel like this isn't necessarily solely about being a lesbian, but so much about being a woman. Again, I'm not trying to steal your... I peeked
Yes.
at your notes. I already saw that you saw that, but I'm just thinking about that a
Yeah.
lot. But in particular, just like the care that this movie has for its characters. It like the way that they love each other, not just each other, but the maid as well. And the women singing together at the campfire.
Yes.
It's just like a way to approach the world. It just feels so unique and refreshing watching in a movie that is generally so centric in another way
Yeah.
with characters and how women approach things. This movie, though, it just feels like, wow, like seeing somebody and having this deep care, these deep feelings is so real and feels so much more authentic and feels, just like you've said before, just helps, just kind of makes me feel. It's a yearn fest, which we love.
Yeah, absolutely.
So yeah, just very, very impressed. Very, very positive things to say. A very unique and a very good way to represent some of these struggles and to work from there. Yeah.
Yeah, the reason I kind of say that, so what I've said about this film before is I think it's more about the female experience than it is about the lesbian experience. And the reason I kind of say that is I first had this thought when I had a friend one time who was basically like a male friend, and he was like, hey, if you had to give me like 3 to 5 films that describe the feminine experience, which movies would you pick?
Mm-hmm.
And I was like, let me think on that. And this is one of them, simply because you have, the whole subplot with the maid. I feel like this movie perfectly encompasses, kind of what it was like to be a woman in the 18th century, where like your decisions weren't yours. And it's really interesting watching it and being like, wow, Marianne really did have a lot of independence.
Mm-hmm.
And, Eloise kind of says that. She's like, you have the choice to get married or not. I don't. I have to do something. And yeah, just that whole, the second half of the movie in particular kind of paints them in like they're in their own little bubble.
Yeah.
They're this little family of these 3 women, and these 2 women are just falling head over heels in love with each other. But in the back of your mind, there is this ticking clock
Mm-hmm.
of like, eventually the mother is going to come back, and eventually Eloise is going to be taken to get married to this Italian man.
Right.
And that's just the situation. And like the scene that really hits home on that is when Eloise is like, you want me to reject this. Like, you want me to kind of resist and fight back. And Marianne goes, yes. And Eloise goes, are you asking me to? And she goes, no. And like that scene is heartbreaking in so many ways. But like that idea of you're trapped, there is this ticking clock. And eventually this, this romantic I don't want to say fantasy, but this beautiful experience that you're living in is going to end.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I really, there's a lot of, again, talking about composition of shots or just sort of a lot of symbolism throughout the movie. Obviously, it's a lot of it is centered on the story of Orpheus, right? Orpheus?
Yes, Orpheus and Eurydice.
Or it's the look back story when he goes to get his wife from the underworld. And I think that scene in particular, when they're reading the story, that was one of my favorite scenes. Also, when they're cooking dinner together and they're all just like sitting there doing things, I think that was one of my favorite scenes as well. Yeah, really, really well done. I think you have better ways to get these thoughts out other than me, but I just feel like it really well done on every account.
No, you're saying all the right things. You're saying the scenes that I also love. The story of Orpheus and Eurydice is, just lots of symbolism there. When they're reading the story too, and she was like, well, maybe she told Orpheus to look back.
Yeah.
And then later when Marianne is she hugs Eloise for the last time, and she's rushing out of the house. And just as she gets to the door, Eloise says, look back.
Yeah.
And she sees her in that white dress. It's just also I would recommend to people, if you haven't seen this, do not watch the trailer beforehand. And here is why, because I think the trailer ruins this scene or this sequence. The first time I watched it, when you meet Eloise for the first time, you don't see her, you just see her silhouette. She's got the hood up of her big like cloak thing. And so you see her silhouette, and then you just see the back of her head. And then you see her pick up the pace and the hood falls, and you see, oh, now you've got more context, you can see her hair. And then she breaks out into a run, and you're kind of thinking what Marianne is thinking, like, this woman's sister just threw herself off the cliff. Is this woman about to throw herself off the cliff? And so Marianne is kind of frantically running after her, and then Eloise stops, and she turns around, and it's just with the backdrop of the gorgeous sea, and then just the exhilaration on her face, her kind of little like half smile smirk thing she's got going on. That moment when I watched it for the first time, like that shot struck me like lightning. And it was one of those things where I was like, oh, I know why Marianne fell in love with this person.
I think what this movie does so well is that the first half of the movie, the whole plot is she has to paint her without her knowing. And so
yes,
it does a really good job of you as the viewer getting these glimpses of her to try to, I feel like, yourself create this image of what she looks like. And so you kind of go through that with Marianne at the same time of like piecing little things together and like seeing little drawings that make it up, and like you're having sort of that same experience. And so I think that that's, and again, she's a very distinct looking person. And so it does feel like unique to be in this world trying to capture that.
Yeah, another thing I say is, like, I wrote down like power of observation, but for me it's the idea, like, this movie is also about observing and painting and seeing someone. But I think the big connection here is, like, if you really see someone, if you spend so much time observing them and seeing them and knowing them, you can't help but fall in love.
Yeah.
Like, if you really see who this person is, the natural, like, you will fall in love with that person. And I just think that there's, like you said, the audience spends so much time really observing and noticing the things that Marianne is noticing, that you're wrapped up in this, you're swept up in these emotions that Marianne is swept up in. And one kind of interesting point that I think benefits the film, Celine Sciamma and Adèle Haenel are ex-lovers. So yes. So I think a lot of the shots, a lot of the observations, a lot of these things, I think we're seeing it through the eyes of a lover. And I think that benefits the film because Celine Sciamma is able to really highlight these parts of Adele that she would very intimately know about as a lover of hers. And I think that benefits the film.
That's awesome. I had the thought a few times of that saying, to be loved is to be seen.
Yes.
So it's awesome when you get those scenes of them saying, hey, when you're sad, you do this. When you're stressed, you do this. When you're happy, you do this. And then to flip that back and to do it to the other. I love that. Again, as you talk about yearning, as you talk about love, as you talk about how you capture that in a film, that's one of those scenes that you're like, that's tapping into some real emotions that I've felt or that I've seen before. So I really liked how that was handled.
Yeah, no, I agree. I don't know. I could talk about this film all day. I know I say that about so many films, but like, if you look at my letterbox, if you listen to our first couple episodes, like, this is one of my all-time favorite films. And it's, when I first watched it, was in my top 10, and it's just slowly creeped up into, I think it's either 3 or 4 for me now. I love it, but I also think, like, one of my friends, it's funny reading different reviews on Letterboxd, because you have people who are like, believe the hype. I've mentioned him before, but one of my favorite critics, Tim Brayton, he goes, like, his review starts off by like, December of 2019 is pretty late in the game for best romance of the decade, but I'll take it, or something like that.
That is,
like,
yeah, that's funny.
Yeah, I'm just like, yeah, absolutely. I do want to talk a little bit about the use of and the lack of music, because I don't know if you noticed while watching this movie doesn't have a score.
Okay, so when I was talking about all the technical aspects a second ago, I was like, what? I guess I was like, the score didn't leave much of an impression on me. So talk more about that.
There
'Cause I was
isn't
like,
one.
I don't remember anything.
There isn't one.
Interesting.
This film doesn't have a score, which I think the moments in the movie where there is music is when Marianne is playing, I think it's called a harpsichord, the like clink, the plunky sounding piano, and she plays, the Vivaldi number. And then the second moment is where the women are
Right.
singing and chanting together at the bonfire. And then the final one is the Vivaldi performance at the end.
Right.
And I think the lack of score allows those moments to really pack a punch.
Mm-hmm.
Because, consciously or not, you're not hearing music through the whole thing. And so then when you do, I think our body kind of sits up and takes notice, like, oh, there's something going on here. There's music. And I haven't been hearing music for the past, 45 minutes or whatever. And I think a few things. I think it partially makes it a little more grounded and real because there isn't this, I think it's called non-diegetic sound in the background. Like there isn't this sweeping score or anything. Like you are left to sit with simply what's happening in the same way that the characters are. They don't get to hear, Hans Zimmer doing something crazy in the background. And so, yeah, I think it works for this film. And there's a few films that don't have a score. But yeah, I prefer the lack of music because I think it allows those three scenes that do feature music kind of get their time to stand in the sun, as I think they need to, because they are vital scenes to the.
Yeah, and it's so central to their romance and the way that they interact with each other. That's kind of how Louise is talking about how much she loves music and sort of the freedom or feeling she's able to feel with that. So then it is this sweet moment when she plays the harpsichord to obviously connected through the very last scene, right? That's, you talk about symbols, you talk about ways that they're able to connect with each other, although they're not together. There's the painting with page 28 on it. And that's the way that Marianne is able to understand that love was real. And then Heloise at the same time is seen at the Vivaldi concert just being overcome with emotion. So that's the way that Marianne's able to see that love was real, or, so it's just a very powerful use that I didn't even realize until you mentioned it, but it's obviously very intentional to kind of paint that picture. No pun intended.
Can we talk about that Can we talk about that last scene for a few minutes?
Yeah, of course.
Just because I love it so much. The facial acting on Eloise's face is devastating. Like the slow, because there's different ways to do, because I did theater growing up and in high school and a little bit in college, and there's different ways to portray sadness.
Mm-hmm.
And like I remember there was one scene, it wasn't a scene I was in, but it was one that one of my teachers was working on with someone, where I want to say it was like someone went to war, and so her husband went to war, he passed away, and they sent his uniform back to her. And the actress initially, opened the box with the uniform and then fell onto it and started crying. And what my drama teacher had her do was she opened the box, and then there was like restraint. Like she reached out and touched it and kind of, moved her hand away and wasn't quite willing to look at it and embrace this thing. And I feel like that's kind of what you see with Eloise here, is she doesn't just erupt into tears the minute the music starts. It's this slow build, and you can tell, she's a fairly noble-esque woman. She married this man, and she's in a beautiful gown, and she's at this orchestration, and you do see that restraint of her kind of being like, yes, this beautiful song, and you slowly see it build until at the end you even see her smile a couple times, but by the end she is weeping. And like I think I texted you this last night, like I am unable to get through those last 5 to 10 minutes without just completely falling apart.
Yeah.
I've seen it, I think this is my third time now, and every single time I get to that final scene, and I could be dry-eyed the whole movie just loving it. I'm like, this is great, and that final scene just does me in. I am a sobbing, weeping mess by the end of it. And like Sarah looked over to me and was basically like, after I kind of cleaned myself up a little bit, she was like, "Are you okay?" And I was like, "Yeah, like I'm not even just terribly sad." I was like, this is what happens. Like movies make me feel things, and movies make me cry, and that is just the situation. But Yeah, that final scene just like I said, it kind of sets it up with the Orpheus and Eurydice painting and then the page 28 painting. So I'm already all in my feels. And then that final scene just movies are magic,
Yeah.
Adam. Like I don't know what else to say. Movies are magic.
Yeah. Well said.
Because
Couldn't
I
have said
remember
it better.
this is last thing, like I remember when I watched this the first time and I was like, this is gonna be sad, huh? Like I knew it was a queer film, and I'm settling in and I'm like, "Oh, it's a period piece. This is gonna be sad, isn't it?" Because most gay movies are sad. Less now, but like, you brought up Brokeback Mountain, there's also Call Me by Your Name. Like they're sad, and that's the situation. But like nothing could prepare me for that end scene. I love it.
Good. I'm glad we got to cover it. I had a really good time.
I'm very happy. I've said before, like, I say this about a handful of films, but this is really, like, I think a stone cold masterpiece. Like, it is one of the great contemporary films of our generation. Like, I think this is just truly one of, like, top tier film.
Yeah, I agree.
So, I mean, this hit me in a very personal spot. I think the craft of this is just flawless. Again, another review I read by Tim is he goes, "It's not just that this movie does everything right, it's that this movie does everything perfectly."
Hmm.
And I couldn't agree more. So, I mean, should surprise absolutely no one. This is a 5-star film for me.
Yeah, I agree with a lot of that. It's a 4.5 for me. Only I loved a lot of it. I have nothing negative to say. I just am very stingy with my 5s.
And that's kind of because when I looked at your review last night, because I finished the movie and then I was reading some things and I saw your review and I was like, well, it's a good thing we're talking about this tomorrow because I'm going to set him straight. But then I was like, well, a lot of people reserve 5 stars for ones that hit them on a very like personal and emotional level.
Yes, and that's very true for me.
Yeah, and so that was my thought at the time. I was like, I'm gonna guess he did 4.5 simply because he is not a woman, he is not a lesbian, and this might not hit him as hard as some other films.
Right, but still loved it.
Yeah, I mean, last thing I'll say about it that I think is really cool, it's very erotic without ever feeling like dirty.
Yeah, I definitely agree.
There's never really like, you're never under the impression that like the gazes are like overly sexualized or like lustful. It's a lot of yearning.
Yeah, it feels very, I'll say, sexually tense for them, but it's not doing it in a way that is like to satisfy the viewer, like us,
Yeah, there were moments that I looked at Sarah and I was like, a man would not have directed this scene that way.
Yeah.
And no, that's not me, throwing shade at men. There are movies by male directors that I love. There are lesbian movies by male directors that I love. But there's a way, it's kind of like when I saw Wonder Woman for the first time and there were shots of her where it was like, the point is that she's powerful, not that she's beautiful. The pan up at No Man's Land on Wonder Woman is very much like, look at this force of nature and not, oh, look at her butt, look at her boobs, look at her thighs, look at her hair. And this movie, I kind of feel similar. It's less about, ooh, look at these hypersexual, like, let's look at the boobs and the butt. And it's more of, look at the hands and the fingers and the eyes and the ear and the face. It's still observing this beautiful person and even admiring them to a degree, but it's not this, I don't get that there's any exploitation here.
Yeah.
It's just like, wow, I'm so grateful that I just get to be in the presence of this beautiful person.
Yeah. Agreed.
Anyway, sorry, I like am over here swooning over this film because I do love it and I find it so romantic. But we'll wrap it up there. But yeah, I mean, 5 stars for me, 4.5 from Adam. I would say if you haven't seen this, I said this on Instagram as well. It's on HBO Max, it's on Hulu, so like no excuses.
It's only on HBO Max till the end of the month, though.
Probably because it's February. So yeah. Again, no excuses. It's a lovely, lovely film. It's 2 hours that I don't find anyone regretting. But Adam, I have a question for you.
Hit me.
And that is, what are we watching?
We are watching more romance movies. We're going to cover top couple, probably excluding what we just watched just to get a little more variety in. And then we
Right.
probably have at least 2, maybe 3 more Ghibli episodes up the pipe. So if you are trying to follow along with that, just keep on going that. We appreciate everyone that does listen. You can find us anywhere you find your podcast. So please keep interacting with us on our social medias and listening to the podcast and throwing out suggestions, and we'll keep yapping. So thank you, and until next time.
Catch you later.